Desmond, I have tried. I don't like this girl for you. Too much pride. Too much confidence. Tell her to leave this house.
CHIAMAKA, maybe it's best you give us some space for now.
Wait, are both of you okay? Desmond, have you people forgotten this house belongs to me?
Desmond, this house, is it your house or CHIAMAKA's house?
It's CHIAMAKA's house.
Amazing. Homeless people nearly sent me out of my own mansion.
In one of the most beautiful estates in Lagos, where the streets were always clean, flowers lined the roads, and every house looked like something from a rich family television show, lived a woman named CHIAMAKA, a tall, beautiful, dark-skinned businesswoman with glossy skin, expensive tastes, and the kind of peaceful confidence that made people stare whenever she entered a room. Her mansion stood proudly on a quiet street, surrounded by tall white fences, bright security lights, and carefully trimmed flowers that her gardener treated like children. The house was huge, painted cream and gold, with wide balconies, giant glass windows, and marble floors so shiny that visitors were always afraid to walk too fast on them. Even the two gatemen at the entrance enjoyed life because CHIAMAKA treated her workers well. During Christmas, they received bags of rice, money, clothes, and chicken, which was why their stomachs had become round and happy-looking. People in the estate used to joke that the security men were eating better than some office workers in Lagos. CHIAMAKA also had a chef named Beams, who cooked food that smelt like heaven itself, and a cleaner named Beatrice, who cleaned the house with the seriousness of someone preparing it for a president's visit every single day. The generator in the compound was so powerful that even when the entire street was dark during power failure, CHIAMAKA's house still shined brightly like a wedding venue. Her neighbors used to laugh and say, "NEPA fears this house." CHIAMAKA had money, comfort, beauty, and peace. But the only thing she did not have was a good man. Men always came into her life with sweet words and bad intentions. Some acted intimidated by her success. Others wanted her to become her sponsor. One man once asked her for business capital during their third date. Another one borrowed her car and disappeared for 2 days without answering calls. After many disappointments, CHIAMAKA stopped taking relationships seriously. She focused all her energy on her interior decoration company, which was growing fast across Lagos. Her clients were rich people, celebrities, and politicians who trusted her expensive taste. Every morning, she woke up early, drank tea while checking business emails, and left for work looking elegant and confident in fitted dresses, expensive heels, and perfumes that announced her arrival before she even entered a room. But deep inside her heart, there were lonely moments she never showed anybody. Sometimes at night after work, she would sit alone in her large living room with soft music playing quietly and wonder if she would ever meet a man who loved her genuinely and not because of her money. One rainy evening, after a very stressful day supervising workers at a client's mansion, CHIAMAKA drove through heavy Lagos traffic feeling tired and hungry. The rain had started suddenly, pouring heavily on cars, buses, and roadside traders who struggled to protect their goods with nylon covers. Everywhere looked wet and noisy. Horns blasted endlessly. Okada riders drove carelessly through muddy water. Street hawkers ran from one car to another trying to sell roasted corn, bottled water, and plantain chips under the rain. CHIAMAKA leaned back against her car seat and sighed deeply. "This Lagos will not kill somebody one day," she murmured tiredly while rubbing her forehead. Her driver was off that day, so she was driving herself. She had skipped lunch because of work and her stomach was beginning to protest seriously.
As she drove slowly through a less busy road, she suddenly noticed a small roadside buka with smoke rising from hot pots of soup and grilled meat. The smell of pepper soup entered her car through the slightly open window immediately, and her stomach almost cried with joy. She parked near the buka and quickly covered her hair with a scarf before stepping outside carefully to avoid muddy water. The rain was still falling lightly. Inside the buka, plastic chairs and tables were scattered around under a zinc roof, while customers sat eating noisily. Some bus drivers argued loudly about football. One woman was laughing too hard while chewing meat. The owner of the buka, a thick woman with sweaty face and loud voice, moved around angrily, shouting at workers to serve customers faster. CHIAMAKA smiled slightly as she sat down at one corner, enjoying the simple atmosphere away from rich people problems and fake accents. Sometimes she liked places like that because nobody there cared about designer bags or expensive shoes. Everybody was simply trying to survive Lagos. She ordered hot pepper soup and cold drink, then relaxed while waiting. As she sat there scrolling through her phone absent-mindedly, her attention slowly moved toward one young man sitting under a leaking umbrella close to the edge of the buka. At first she barely noticed him, but after some minutes she realized the man had not ordered anything. He just sat there staring at a small calculator and an old phone on the table before him. He looked tired, frustrated, and completely defeated by life. Rainwater dripped slowly beside him while he rubbed his face repeatedly and whispered to himself. He was handsome, very handsome actually, with neat low-cut hair, smooth dark skin, and a calm face that looked naturally attractive even while suffering. But his clothes looked tired. His white shirt was slightly faded and the sleeves were folded carelessly. His black shoes had seen better days. There was sadness all over him. CHIAMAKA tried to ignore him at first, but Nigerian curiosity entered her body little by little. She kept stealing glances at him while pretending to check her phone. Then she heard him speak quietly to the buka woman. "Madam, please, can I pay you tomorrow morning? I just need 1 bottle of Coke. My head is turning." The woman stopped suddenly and looked at him with irritation. "Young man, what is all this?" she shouted loudly. "Since 1 hour now you are sitting there pressing calculator like accountant of suffering. If you don't have money, leave my shop. This is not charity home." Some people nearby turned immediately to look at him. One bus driver laughed loudly and said, "Boss, even Coke don't cost past your budget." Another customer shook his head mockingly. The young man lowered his face in shame. "Please, I'm serious," he said quietly. "I lost my ATM card yesterday and..." The woman cut him off immediately. "I don't want story. Everybody in Lagos has problem. If I start feeding broke people for free, my own children will suffer." More laughter followed from some customers. CHIAMAKA felt something pinch her heart sharply. The embarrassment on the young man's face was painful to watch. He looked like a man trying very hard not to break down publicly. For a few seconds she hesitated. She had been warned many times not to get involved in strangers' problems because Lagos was full of tricks and fake stories. But something about the young man looked genuine. Maybe it was the shame in his eyes. Maybe it was how quiet he remained instead of arguing. Or maybe it was simply because CHIAMAKA had a soft heart no matter how hard she tried to hide it. Before she could change her mind, she raised her hand slightly. "Madam, please give him what he wants," she said calmly. "I'll pay." The buka woman's attitude changed immediately. "Ah, fine, auntie, no problem," she said quickly while smiling widely. "I did not know he came with somebody." The young man looked up in surprise. Their eyes met for the first time. He looked shocked, embarrassed, and grateful at the same time. "No, you don't have to," he started saying, but CHIAMAKA interrupted gently. "It's fine. Sit down." The woman soon brought a bottle of Coke and even added meat because now somebody rich was paying. The young man held the bottle quietly for a moment before speaking again. "Thank you," he said softly. "You really didn't have to do this." CHIAMAKA shrugged lightly. "It's just Coke. Lagos has humbled all of us one time or another." That statement almost made him laugh for the first time. After some silence, she asked carefully, "Are you okay?" The young man hesitated before answering. "Honestly, not really." There was something sincere in the way he said it. CHIAMAKA studied him more carefully now. Beneath the tired clothes and sad expression, she could tell he used to live a better life. His English was polished, his posture was not rough, even the watch on his wrist looked expensive though old. "What happened?" she asked quietly. He sighed deeply and leaned back in the plastic chair. Rain continued falling softly around them while noisy conversations filled the buka. "Everything happened," he said bitterly. 3 months ago, I had a good banking job. I had my own apartment, my own car. Life was moving well. Then, the company downsized workers and I lost my job unexpectedly. At first, I thought I would quickly get another one. I used all my savings trying to survive while searching. Nothing came. Rent expired. I sold my car. Debt started entering from every direction. Friends disappeared one by one.
Now I'm staying in one friend's parlor where mosquitoes behave like landlords and NEPA only visits once every 100 years. CHIAMAKA listened quietly without interrupting. The way he spoke carried deep frustration and shame. "What's your name?" she finally asked. "Desmond," he replied. "And you?" "CHIAMAKA." He nodded slowly. "You look successful." She laughed softly. "You figured that out from one pepper soup?" "No," he replied honestly, "from the way everybody here has been staring since you entered." That made her laugh properly this time. For the first time in many weeks, Desmond smiled slightly too. They talked longer than either of them expected. At first, the conversation stayed simple. But slowly, Desmond opened up more about his struggles. He explained how hard Lagos became when money disappeared. He described pretending to be okay while secretly suffering. He talked about avoiding calls from creditors and feeling ashamed whenever old colleagues posted happy pictures online. CHIAMAKA listened carefully and found herself feeling deeply sorry for him. There was no arrogance in him anymore. Life had humbled him completely. At some point, the rain became heavier again and thunder shook the sky loudly. CHIAMAKA looked outside and sighed. This rain is not ending anytime soon. Desmond nodded absent-mindedly. Then his stomach growled loudly enough for both of them to hear. He looked embarrassed immediately while CHIAMAKA burst into laughter. "Please order food," she said, still laughing. "Your stomach is protesting publicly." He resisted at first, but she insisted until he finally ordered rice and chicken. The way he ate carefully, like someone trying not to appear too hungry, touched her heart even more because she could tell he was actually starving. As the night became darker and the rain continued, CHIAMAKA checked the time and realized it was getting late. She stood slowly and picked up her handbag. "How are you getting home?" she asked. Desmond looked uncomfortable again. "I'll find my way." "In this rain?" she asked. He forced a weak smile. "Lagos people survive somehow." CHIAMAKA hesitated for a long moment. Her mind warned her to mind her business, but her heart refused to cooperate. Finally, she spoke carefully. "You said your friend's place is uncomfortable, right?" Desmond nodded slowly, confused about where the conversation was going. CHIAMAKA took a deep breath. "I have enough space in my house. You can stay temporarily while you sort yourself out." Desmond froze completely. "What?" She shrugged awkwardly. "It's not a big deal. I have guest rooms. At least you'll be comfortable while searching for another job." Desmond stared at her like someone trying to understand if he was dreaming. No, I can't do that." "Why?" "Because we just met." "True. And because people are dangerous." CHIAMAKA smiled slightly. "You don't look dangerous." Desmond looked down quietly. "You don't know me." "Maybe," she replied softly. "But sometimes people just need help." He became silent for several seconds, clearly fighting emotions inside himself. Finally, he spoke in a low voice. "Nobody has spoken kindly to me in a very long time." CHIAMAKA's heart softened completely at those words. "Then maybe life is trying to apologize to you small," she joked gently, making him laugh weakly again. After more hesitation and reassurance, Desmond finally accepted the offer quietly, still looking shocked by her kindness, while CHIAMAKA herself had no idea that her soft heart had just opened the door for the biggest drama of her life. The next morning in Lagos, the rain had stopped completely, and the estate looked fresh and beautiful under the early morning sun. Water still rested on flowers and parked cars, while birds moved around quietly inside the peaceful neighborhood. Inside CHIAMAKA's mansion, the smell of pancakes, fried eggs, and coffee floated gently from the kitchen, while Bims, the chef, moved around proudly in her orange chef uniform with blue apron and chef cap, humming loudly as she cooked breakfast. Beatrice, the cleaner, was already dusting furniture carefully while soft gospel music played quietly from one speaker in the living room. CHIAMAKA had barely slept properly the previous night because her mind kept replaying the strange decision she had made at the buka. Several times during the night, she almost convinced herself she was crazy for bringing a complete stranger into her home. At one point, she even sat up on her bed around 2 a.m., wondering if she should cancel the whole arrangement before morning. But each time she remembered the hopeless look on Desmond's face, her heart softened again. Something deep inside her believed he was not a bad person. Maybe life had simply dealt with him badly. By 8 a.m., she was dressed for work in a fitted wine-colored gown with matching heels and glossy makeup that made her look powerful without even trying. Just as she stepped downstairs holding her phone and car keys, the sound of a car entering the compound reached her ears. One of the gatemen quickly opened the door and Desmond walked in carrying one medium-sized travel bag and looking cleaner than the night before, but still nervous. He paused near the entrance gate for a few seconds and looked around the compound slowly, like someone entering a luxury hotel for the first time in his life. The massive mansion stood proudly before him, shining under the sunlight, with flowers lined neatly beside the tiled walkway. Even the fountain in front of the house sprayed water beautifully into the air. Desmond swallowed hard. "Jesus," he whispered under his breath. One of the gatesmen looked at him proudly and said, "Oga, our madam likes comfort too much." Desmond forced a smile and adjusted the bag on his shoulder before following the gateman inside. The moment he stepped into the living room properly, his mouth almost opened fully from shock. The room looked bigger than some apartments in Lagos. Cream-colored sofas surrounded a giant glass table, while gold decorations and expensive artwork filled the walls. The television hanging on the wall looked almost as wide as a cinema screen. Everything smelled clean and expensive. Even the air conditioner carried rich people confidence. Desmond stood there quietly, trying not to look too impressed, but his eyes moved everywhere. "Good morning," CHIAMAKA said calmly as she walked down the staircase. Desmond turned immediately. For a moment, he simply stared at her because she looked completely different from the tired woman he met at the buka the previous night. She looked elegant, fresh, and powerful. "Good morning," he replied quickly. "You found the place easily?" "Yes," he answered softly. "Your gateman almost gave me a heart attack before allowing me enter." CHIAMAKA laughed lightly. "That means they are doing their job." Desmond nodded awkwardly while still looking around the house. "Your house is beautiful." "Thank you," she replied simply. There was an uncomfortable silence for a few seconds before she pointed upstairs. "Come, let me show you your room." Desmond followed her carefully upstairs while trying not to stare too much at the expensive decorations around him. His shoes made soft sounds against the shiny marble floor. Inside his head, confusion and gratitude fought each other heavily. Less than 24 hours ago, he was sitting under rain, unable to buy coke. Now, he was walking inside a mansion that looked like home of politicians. When CHIAMAKA opened the guest room door, Desmond nearly stopped breathing properly. The room alone was bigger than the apartment he lost months ago. A giant bed stood at the center, covered with white bed sheets. The curtains were thick and beautiful. There was a television on the wall, a standing mirror near the wardrobe, and even a small refrigerator inside the room. The bathroom looked like somewhere rich musicians shot music videos. Desmond turned slowly in disbelief. "This is for me?" he asked quietly. CHIAMAKA smiled slightly at his reaction. "Yes, stay comfortably while you sort yourself out." Desmond dropped his bag slowly and rubbed his face with both hands. "I honestly don't know how to thank you." "Relax," she said. "You don't have to thank me every 5 minutes." But unfortunately, that was exactly what Desmond planned to do. From that very first day, the man behaved so humble and grateful that even the house workers started pitying him. He thanked everybody for everything. He thanked Beatrice because she brought him clean towels. He thanked Bims because the food tasted good. He even thanked one gatesman because the man opened the gate quickly when he returned from buying something outside. At breakfast that morning, Desmond looked almost emotional while eating pancakes and sausages. "This food is amazing," he said seriously. "God bless your chef." Bims laughed proudly from the kitchen. "Ah, thank you, sir."
Then Desmond entered the guest bathroom and came out later looking shocked again. "Your toilet flushes quietly," he said with genuine amazement. Chiamaka burst into laughter immediately. "What kind of compliment is that?" Desmond shook his head sadly. "You don't understand suffering. The place I was staying before, every time somebody flushed toilet, the whole house sounded like generator explosion." Even Chiamaka laughed harder at that. Slowly, the atmosphere around them became easier and more comfortable. Desmond behaved carefully during his first few days in the house. He always cleaned after himself, he spoke politely to workers, he avoided touching expensive things unnecessarily. Anytime Chiamaka returned from work, he stood up respectfully to greet her and ask about her day. Sometimes she found him sitting quietly by the pool area, staring into space with worried expression. Other times, she caught him typing job applications seriously on his laptop. Chiamaka genuinely believed she was helping a good man rebuild his life. Meanwhile, outside the mansion, the estate gossip aunties had already started their work. Every estate in Lagos had women whose main occupation was monitoring other people's business from balconies and windows, and Chiamaka's estate was no different. By the third day, rumors had spread fully that Madam Chiamaka was finally living with a handsome man. One woman called Mrs. Johnson nearly twisted her neck trying to peep through curtains whenever Desmond stepped outside. Another woman told her husband during dinner, "That boy entering Chiamaka's house every day is too fine to be ordinary visitor." Her husband rolled his eyes and continued eating. "Please, let people rest." But the women refused to rest. Every morning, somebody always found excuse to stand near Chiamaka's gate hoping to see Desmond. One evening, as Desmond jogged around the estate wearing expensive sportswear Chiamaka bought for him, two women walking nearby slowed down immediately. "Good evening," one greeted sweetly while staring openly at his face. Desmond smiled politely. "Good evening, ma." The second woman nudged her friend excitedly after he passed. Chiamaka did not tell us she was hiding this kind of man in her house." Back inside the mansion, Desmond adjusted into soft life faster than anybody expected. Honestly, suffering left his body with shocking speed. Within 1 week, his skin was glowing again from good food and peaceful sleep. The permanent stress on his face disappeared gradually. He now woke up every morning inside air conditioner instead of fighting mosquitoes in darkness. He ate hot breakfast daily. He walked around the mansion comfortably in soft slippers and expensive casual clothes Chiamaka casually bought for him during one shopping trip. At first, he resisted accepting expensive things from her, but the resistance did not last long. "You need decent clothes for interviews," Chiamaka insisted one afternoon while handing him several shopping bags. "A man should look good before opportunity arrives." Desmond looked inside the bags and saw designer shirts, polished shoes, trousers, perfumes, and wristwatches. His eyes widened immediately. "All these for me?" Chiamaka shrugged carelessly. "It's nothing serious." But to Desmond, it was very serious. Nobody had treated him with such care in a very long time. That evening, he stood in front of the mirror inside his room, trying on clothes while shaking his head in disbelief. "God, please don't let me mess this up," he whispered softly. Yet, slowly, comfort began changing him. The desperation and shame that once followed him everywhere started fading little by little. Soon, Desmond could sit comfortably by the swimming pool for hours pressing his phone and speaking like motivational speaker waiting for breakthrough from heaven. Sometimes, Chiamaka returned from work and found him relaxing under umbrella chair with soft music playing nearby. "Job seeker," she would tease jokingly. Desmond would laugh and reply dramatically, "Madam Life Coach, motivation is part of recovery." One afternoon, she found him sleeping beside the pool, completely stretched out under sunlight. "Desmond," she shouted laughing, "are you now on vacation?" He opened one eye lazily. "Please allow me enjoy small peace before Lagos suffering remembers my address again." Chiamaka laughed so hard she nearly bent over. Honestly, his presence slowly brightened the house. Desmond knew how to make people laugh naturally. He told funny stories about Lagos life, terrible landlords, and former office workers who acted important because they carried laptop bags. During dinner,
Even Beams sometimes stood near the kitchen door listening to his stories and laughing loudly. CHIAMAKA started enjoying coming home because the house no longer felt empty and cold. Slowly, friendship began turning into emotional closeness. Desmond started calling her sweet names jokingly. "My queen," he would say dramatically whenever she walked into the room looking beautiful after work. "Please remove your eyes from me," CHIAMAKA would reply while laughing. Sometimes he carried her handbag upstairs even when she clearly did not need help. Other times he hugged her warmly when she returned from stressful meetings. At first, CHIAMAKA resisted emotionally because she feared disappointment, but Desmond knew how to behave like perfect wounded man healing through love. He listened attentively whenever she spoke about work stress. He complimented her intelligence constantly. One night, while they sat outside near the pool drinking wine, Desmond looked at her quietly and said, "You know something?" "What?" she asked. "You saved me." CHIAMAKA looked away awkwardly. "Please don't make it dramatic." "I'm serious," he continued softly. "You met me at the worst moment of my life and still treated me like a human being." His voice carried real emotion. CHIAMAKA felt her heart move slightly again. "Everybody deserves kindness," she replied gently. Desmond stared at her for several seconds before smiling slowly. "That's why you're different." The chemistry between them grew stronger every day after that. Yet, there was one strange thing CHIAMAKA noticed constantly. Desmond was always on the phone with somebody called Mommy. At first, she found it sweet and harmless. The man called his mother almost every hour, morning, afternoon, night. Sometimes, he disappeared into the balcony for long conversations. Other times, he sat openly in the living room discussing every detail of his life. "Yes, Mommy, I've eaten. Yes, Mommy, the room is cold. Yes, Mommy, the mattress is soft. Yes, Mommy, she bought me new clothes. Yes, Mommy, there's even swimming pool." The first time CHIAMAKA overheard one of those conversations, she laughed. "You report your entire life to your mother?" Desmond smiled proudly. "It's just me and her. She raised me alone." "That's sweet," CHIAMAKA replied honestly. Desmond's face softened whenever he spoke about his mother. "My mother suffered for me," he said seriously one evening. "She sacrificed everything after my father left, so I can never ignore her." CHIAMAKA respected that deeply because family meant a lot to her too. Sometimes, during phone calls, she even heard the woman's loud, dramatic voice from the other side. "Desmond, have you eaten properly? Desmond, wear singlet if the AC is too cold. Desmond, don't trust people too quickly." One day, CHIAMAKA joked, "Your mother sounds like she still thinks you are 12 years old." Desmond laughed proudly instead of feeling embarrassed. "To her, I'll always be her baby." CHIAMAKA smiled and shook her head. She honestly thought the relationship was adorable. She did not see danger anywhere. In her mind, a man who loved his mother deeply must naturally be a good man. What she did not know was that somewhere far away, a dramatic woman with strong opinions and dangerous attachment issues was already preparing to enter her peaceful mansion like final boss in Nigerian movie. The peaceful routine inside CHIAMAKA's mansion in Lagos continued smoothly for some days. And honestly, CHIAMAKA had slowly started believing that maybe, just maybe, life had finally decided to reward her with a decent man after years of disappointment and stress. Every morning, Desmond behaved sweet and caring, following her around the kitchen while she prepared to leave for work, carrying her handbag unnecessarily, opening car doors dramatically, and saying things like, "My queen must not stress herself," while CHIAMAKA laughed and pushed him playfully away. Even the house staff had started getting used to his presence. Bims, the chef, now prepared his favorite breakfast confidently, while Beatrice sometimes teased him openly whenever he sat by the pool pressing phone for too long. "Sir, this your job search looks very comfortable," she joked one afternoon while dusting nearby. Desmond laughed proudly. "Please, healing is part of success journey." Everybody laughed, including CHIAMAKA, because honestly, the man had become part of the house atmosphere so naturally that it felt strange imagining the mansion without him. But one thing remained constant. Every single day, sometimes every hour, Desmond stayed on the phone with his mother. Sometimes his voice became soft and childish whenever he spoke to her. Yes, mommy, I've eaten. No, mommy, I'm wearing singlet. Yes, mommy, she's very kind. CHIAMAKA found it amusing more than anything else. One evening, while they sat together watching television, she even joked, "At this point, your mother knows what I ate for lunch." Desmond laughed proudly instead of feeling embarrassed. "My mother likes knowing everything. She worries too much." CHIAMAKA shook her head, smiling. "You are lucky she loves you like that." Desmond looked serious immediately. "My mother is all I have." And honestly, CHIAMAKA respected that deeply because family mattered to her too. She did not realize that the same phone calls she found sweet were actually detailed daily reports being delivered to a woman whose attachment to her son had crossed normal level long ago. Then one hot Thursday afternoon, everything changed completely. CHIAMAKA had spent the whole day moving from one client meeting to another under terrible Lagos heat. Traffic frustrated her. One client wasted almost 2 hours arguing over cutting colors. Another delayed payment again. By the time she finally drove back toward her estate, all she wanted was cold Chapman, soft music, and silence. Her head hurt slightly from stress. She loosened her seatbelt a little while driving and sighed deeply. "God, I beg," she murmured tiredly. The moment her car turned into the estate street, she noticed confusion immediately near her gate. One of the gatemen stood outside looking stressed, while another tried unsuccessfully to calm down one loud woman dragging 2 giant Ghana Must-Go bags behind her. Even from inside the car, CHIAMAKA could hear shouting. "Open this gate," the woman screamed loudly. "Are you blind? My son owns this house." CHIAMAKA slowed the car immediately in confusion. The woman looked impossible to ignore. She wore one oversized Ankara gown covered with bright flower patterns and gold slippers that slapped loudly against the ground whenever she moved. Her gele sat aggressively on her head like somebody tied it during wrestling competition. Sweat covered her face while she argued loudly with the gateman as if she came prepared for battle. The 2 giant Ghana Must-Go bags beside her looked heavy enough to contain half of a village. CHIAMAKA parked slowly and stepped out of the car carefully. "What is happening here?" she asked tiredly. The gateman looked relieved immediately. "Madam, good afternoon," he said quickly. "This woman says she's looking for Mr. Desmond." Before he could finish, the woman turned sharply and stared at CHIAMAKA from head to toe. "Ah," she shouted dramatically. "So you are here finally, since these gate people don't want to respect me." CHIAMAKA blinked slowly, confused already. "Good afternoon, ma," she greeted politely. The woman ignored the greeting completely. "Call my son," she demanded loudly. "I have been standing under this sun like refugee." CHIAMAKA remained calm, though irritation was already entering her chest. "Who is your son?" she asked carefully. "Desmond, of course," the woman replied proudly while adjusting her gele. "Who else?" Immediately, CHIAMAKA understood. "Oh," she said slowly, "you're Desmond's mother?" "Yes," the woman answered with dramatic energy. "I am his mother, the original one, the one that suffered." Then, without waiting for permission, the woman grabbed both Ghana Must-Go bags and marched directly through the gate like politician entering campaign rally. CHIAMAKA stood there briefly stunned before following behind slowly while the gatemen exchanged worried looks with each other. Even before entering the house properly, the woman had already started talking loudly. "This estate is too quiet," she complained. "How do rich people stay in places without noise? I would die of boredom here." CHIAMAKA forced a small, polite smile. Inside her mind, warning bells had already started ringing softly. The moment the woman entered the mansion, the peaceful atmosphere disappeared completely. She stopped inside the living room and turned around slowly with exaggerated shock. "Jesus Christ," she shouted loudly. "This house is bigger than hospital." Then, before anybody could react properly, she dropped one bag carelessly near the sofa and began touching everything around her with the confidence of somebody inspecting property she inherited legally. She tapped flower vases with her fingernails. She opened cupboards without permission. She pressed television remote controls randomly until loud music suddenly blasted from speakers. She shouted. Why is the television too flat like this? CHIAMAKA stood frozen near the entrance, watching the entire scene like a person trapped inside strange comedy movie. Beams peeped from the kitchen in confusion, while Beatrice nearly dropped the tray she was carrying. At that exact moment, Desmond rushed downstairs after hearing the shouting. "Mommy!" he exclaimed in shock. His mother spread her arms dramatically. "My son!" she cried loudly. Desmond quickly hugged her while laughing awkwardly. "Why didn't you tell me you are coming?" "So you can stop me," the woman replied. "I wanted to surprise you." Then she pushed him back slightly and held his face proudly. "You are looking fresh now. See your skin. Good food has entered your body." Desmond laughed sheepishly while glancing nervously toward CHIAMAKA. "Mommy, calm down small. This is not village." But unfortunately, calmness was not part of the woman's personality. She immediately turned toward CHIAMAKA again and narrowed her eyes suspiciously. "So you are the woman staying with my son?" she asked. The question landed strangely inside the room. Even Beatrice stopped moving completely. CHIAMAKA blinked in surprise because the tone sounded less like greeting and more like accusation. Still, she maintained politeness. "Actually, ma, this is my..." But before she could finish, the woman interrupted loudly. She looked CHIAMAKA up and down slowly again before nodding to herself mysteriously. "Fine girl." Then she turned back toward Desmond immediately. "Carry my bag. My waist is breaking." Desmond quickly grabbed the bags while laughing nervously. "Mommy, you should have called first and missed this surprise," she replied proudly. "Never." CHIAMAKA forced another polite smile, even though confusion was growing stronger inside her chest. Everything about the woman felt too loud, too forceful, too familiar. Yet she tried to remain understanding because, after all, this was Desmond's mother. Maybe she was simply excited. "Please sit down, ma. Can I get you something to drink?" "Cold water first," the woman replied immediately while removing her slippers carelessly near the sofa. This Lagos heat wants to kill somebody. Beams quickly brought cold water while staring secretly at the woman with deep curiosity. The woman collected the glass and drank noisily before sighing dramatically. Better. Then she looked around the living room again. "This chandelier alone can pay somebody's rent for 5 years. Nobody knew how to respond to that statement. Desmond laughed weakly while CHIAMAKA sat down slowly opposite them, trying hard to remain patient. "You should have informed us you were coming," CHIAMAKA said politely. The woman waved her hand carelessly. "I was missing my son. Since he entered Lagos big boy life, he barely visits me." "Mommy, that's not true," Desmond protested softly. "It is true," she insisted loudly. "Every day now it is, 'Mommy, I'm busy. Mommy, I'll call later.' Meanwhile, you are here enjoying air conditioner." Desmond smelled awkwardly like schoolboy caught doing something wrong. CHIAMAKA noticed immediately how his entire behavior changed around his mother. His shoulders relaxed differently, his voice became softer. He suddenly looked less like confident grown man and more like obedient child. "Anyway," the woman continued while standing up suddenly, "show me where I will sleep." CHIAMAKA blinked again. "Sleep?" The woman looked surprised by the question. "Of course sleep. I cannot carry these bags back today. I came to stay small." The way she said small carried dangerous confidence. Before CHIAMAKA could even process the information properly, the woman had already grabbed one bag and started walking around the house inspecting doors. "This room?" she asked while opening one door randomly. "No, Mommy," Desmond replied quickly. "Guest room is upstairs." "Then lead me there. My legs are dying." Desmond looked apologetically toward CHIAMAKA. "It's just for some days," he whispered quietly. CHIAMAKA forced another smile, though something uncomfortable twisted inside her chest. "No problem," she replied politely. Upstairs, the drama continued fully. The moment the woman entered the guest room, she gasped loudly again. "This room alone can fit my entire house." Then she pressed the mattress suspiciously several times. "Why is the bed too soft?" she complained immediately. "Won't person sink inside?" Desmond laughed helplessly. "Mommy, it's memory foam." "Memory what?" she asked loudly. "Please, I don't want any bed that will swallow me during sleep." Then she opened the wardrobe and began arranging her wrappers confidently, like somebody settling into permanent apartment.
Within 30 minutes, wrappers hung over chairs, slippers spread across the floor, nylon bags rested near the bed, and bottles of unknown homemade mixtures occupied one table corner. Chiamaka stood there, politely helping, while silently watching her peaceful guest room transform into market stall. "You people use too much air freshener," the woman complained suddenly while spraying one perfume bottle experimentally. "This room smells like airports." Desmond laughed again. "Mommy, relax." "How can I relax?" she replied dramatically. "Even the toilet light is confusing." By evening, the entire house atmosphere had changed completely. During dinner, the woman inspected every food item suspiciously before eating. "Why is this oil looking somehow?" she asked while staring at the soup. "It's olive oil, ma," Beams explained politely. The woman nearly dropped her spoon. "Olive oil inside soup?" She turned toward Desmond immediately. "My son, are you people sick?" Desmond laughed nervously. "It's healthy, mommy. Healthy people still die," she replied firmly. "Palm oil is food from God." Chiamaka nearly laughed, despite her stress. Throughout dinner, the woman complained about almost everything. The dining table was too shiny, the air conditioner was too cold, the bottled water was too expensive looking. Even the television annoyed her because, according to her, rich people's televisions are too thin and suspicious. Yet, despite all the complaints, she ate 2 full plates of food comfortably and requested extra meat before standing up satisfied. Chiamaka remained polite through everything, though internally she already felt exhausted. She had dealt with difficult clients before, but this woman carried special energy, the type that enter a room and swallow peace immediately. Later that night, after everybody retired to their rooms, Chiamaka finally sat alone in her bedroom holding Cole Chapman exactly like she planned earlier. But instead of enjoying silence, she could still hear the woman's loud voice downstairs discussing something with Desmond. She closed her eyes tiredly and sighed deeply. "God, please give me patience," she whispered softly, not knowing this was only the beginning of the storm that had just entered her peaceful home. After only 3 days inside Chiamaka's peaceful mansion in Lagos, Mommy had completely settled into the house with the confidence of somebody whose grandfather founded the estate personally. And honestly, even the gatemen had started looking confused whenever they saw her marching around the compound, giving orders with one hand on her waist and wrapper tied tightly across her chest like market women preparing for prize fights. The woman woke up every morning already angry at something, and nobody in the house ever understood how one human being could carry so much energy before sunrise. On the 4th morning after her arrival, Chiamaka was still sleeping peacefully when loud shouting suddenly exploded downstairs around 6 a.m. "Jesus Christ!" Mommy's voice boomed through the mansion like church microphone during night vigil. "What kind of breakfast is this?" Chiamaka opened her eyes slowly in confusion while checking the time on her phone. "What is happening again?" she murmured tiredly. Downstairs inside the kitchen, poor Beams the chef stood frozen near the cooker holding frying spoon while Mommy inspected breakfast trays like immigration officers searching for illegal goods. "Oats!" Mommy shouted dramatically while pointing at the bowl on the counter. "Sausage? Pancakes? Is my son now Oyinbo child?" Beams blinked nervously. "Ma, this is what Sir normally eats in the morning. Then stop it immediately," Mommy ordered loudly. "That is why his body became soft. Real men eat real food." She turned toward Desmond, who sat quietly at the dining table scratching his head sleepily. "My son, tell them what you like eating." Desmond looked embarrassed briefly, but instead of defending the breakfast, he smiled weakly and said, "Mommy, leave them, it's okay." But Mommy was not interested in peace. "Okay, how?" she snapped. "Will oats help you get strength?" "Beams," she pointed dramatically at the chef again. "Go and make eba and okra soup immediately." Beams almost dropped the spoon. "Now?" "No, next year," Mommy replied sharply. "My son will not be eating bird food inside this house." At that exact moment, Chiamaka walked downstairs wearing silk pajamas and sleepy expression. "Good morning, everybody," she greeted softly. "What's happening?" Mommy turned immediately. "Good morning," she replied quickly before continuing her complaints without breathing properly. "This your chef wants to starve my son with foreign breakfast." Chiamaka looked at the dining table, then back at Mommy. "It's just breakfast, ma." "Exactly. Breakfast should be serious. Men need strength." Desmond sat there quietly while Beam struggled not to laugh secretly. Chiamaka forced a polite smile even though irritation had already started entering her chest. "Please, Beams, make whatever Mommy wants," she said calmly. "Okay, madam," Beams replied before disappearing quickly into the kitchen. Less than 1 hour later, Desmond sat
proudly eating steaming eba and okra soup by 7 a.m. like village prince who finally returned from war, while Mommy watched happily beside him. "That's my son," she said proudly. "See how alive you look now." Desmond laughed with mouthful of soup. "Mommy, please." CHIAMAKA sat opposite them, drinking coffee quietly while trying to understand how breakfast in her own house suddenly became military operation. That same morning, while preparing for work upstairs, another drama started. CHIAMAKA wore a fitted navy blue dress that hugged her shape beautifully and matched it with expensive heels and silver jewelry. She looked elegant, classy, and confident as always. But the moment she stepped downstairs, Mommy's eyes widened dramatically. She hissed loudly while staring openly. CHIAMAKA paused. "What happened, Ma?" Mommy shook her head slowly, like a disappointed village elder. "Women of nowadays," she muttered loudly, enough for everybody to hear. "No shame again." The living room became awkwardly silent immediately. Even Beatrice stopped arranging flowers for a second. CHIAMAKA blinked in surprise. "Excuse me?" Mommy waved her hand carelessly. "Nothing, it's your body." Then she turned toward Desmond immediately. "My son, women who expose themselves too much attract unnecessary attention." Desmond looked uncomfortable. "Mommy," but Mommy continued fearlessly. "I'm only saying truth. In my time, decent women covered themselves properly." CHIAMAKA stood there, frozen for several seconds before forcing a small smile. "I'm running late for work," she said calmly while taking up her handbag. Inside her chest, irritation burned hotter than before, but she refused to argue with an older woman. As she walked toward the door, Mommy still muttered loudly behind her. "Everywhere tight, tight, tight. Can person even breathe inside that dress?" The gatemen outside nearly injured themselves trying not to laugh when CHIAMAKA entered her car with serious face and drove away. From that day forward, the mansion completely lost its previous peaceful rhythm because Mommy turned every single activity into opportunity for criticism, gossip, or confusion. By afternoon, she usually positioned herself on the upstairs balcony, like neighborhood surveillance camera, monitoring every movement inside the estate. Sometimes she stood there for hours discussing complete strangers with anybody unlucky enough to pass nearby. "Who is that woman always wearing red wig?" she would ask one gateman loudly. "And why is that man washing car every day? Is he preparing for election?" The gatemen answered politely because they feared offending her. But privately, both men had already started calling her Estate News Headquarters. One afternoon, CHIAMAKA returned from work and found Mommy leaning dangerously over the balcony railing, watching neighbors passionately. "Ma, please be careful. You'll fall one day." Mommy waved dismissively without removing her eyes from the street. "I'm fine. These your neighbors are interesting people." Then she pointed excitedly. "That woman in yellow has been fighting with her husband since morning. Rich people still have problems." CHIAMAKA sighed tiredly and continued upstairs silently. Even the workers were no longer safe from Mommy's constant opinions. She corrected how Beatrice folded towels. She complained that Beams cooked too much foreign food. She even lectured the gatemen about standing posture, as if she personally paid their salaries. "Stand straight," she barked one evening at one gateman near the entrance. "This is rich people estate, not village meeting." The poor man almost saluted from fear. But the funniest and most shocking thing was how Desmond suddenly lost all independent thinking around his mother. It happened slowly at first. One morning, he walked downstairs wearing black shirt and jeans, looking handsome and confident. Mommy stared at him immediately. "Why black?" she asked suspiciously. "Black attracts bad luck." Desmond paused halfway down the staircase. "Really?" "Yes," Mommy answered confidently. "Go and wear blue." And like obedient schoolboy, this fully grown, unemployed man turned around immediately and went upstairs to change clothes. Beatrice nearly swallowed laughter inside the kitchen, while Beams whispered quietly, "Did you see that?" Another afternoon, Desmond poured himself cold water from the refrigerator during hot weather. Just as he lifted the glass, Mommy shouted from the sofa, "Don't drink cold water." Desmond froze. Why? It weakens chest, Mommy declared seriously. Without another question, Desmond slowly returned the glass and asked Beatrice for warm water instead. CHIAMAKA watched the entire thing from across the room with disbelief hidden behind her smile. Desmond, you're actually listening to that? She asked jokingly. Desmond shrugged casually. My mother knows these things. CHIAMAKA laughed softly at first because honestly, the behavior looked funny. But slowly, it stopped being funny. The more Mommy stayed in the mansion, the more control she seemed to gain over Desmond's behavior. One evening, while CHIAMAKA discussed business stress during dinner, she casually complained about one difficult client who kept changing furniture designs repeatedly. I'm honestly tired of that project, she sighed. The woman changes her mind every 5 business days. Before Desmond could respond, Mommy leaned toward him and whispered loudly enough for everybody to hear. This CHIAMAKA talks too much sometimes. Desmond laughed awkwardly at first. Then suddenly he turned toward CHIAMAKA and said, Actually, you complain a lot about work. The table became silent immediately. CHIAMAKA stared at him in surprise. Excuse me? Desmond shrugged carelessly. I'm just saying, maybe you should relax more. CHIAMAKA looked at him carefully because the tone felt strange. Normally, Desmond listened supportively whenever she discussed work, but now he sat there nodding slightly while his mother watched proudly beside him. Interesting, CHIAMAKA replied calmly before continuing her meal quietly. After dinner, Beams whispered secretly to Beatrice inside kitchen, This man has started growing wings. Beatrice nodded immediately. Free food has entered his head. The workers noticed changes before CHIAMAKA fully accepted them herself. Whenever Mommy criticized CHIAMAKA, Desmond rarely defended her anymore. Instead, he either stayed silent or agreed halfway to keep his mother happy. One Saturday morning, CHIAMAKA planned relaxing breakfast by the pool. She wore comfortable shorts and loose top because she intended staying home all day. The moment Mommy saw her outfit, she nearly choked on tea. Jesus, she exclaimed dramatically. Is this what young women wear inside house now? CHIAMAKA forced a smile. It's just comfortable clothes, ma. Mommy shook her head sadly, like somebody mourning lost generation. My son, don't even look too much. Temptation is everywhere. Desmond laughed awkwardly instead of telling his mother to stop. CHIAMAKA's smile faded slightly after that. Later that same day, another embarrassing scene happened in front of workers. CHIAMAKA asked Desmond politely if he could help supervise one delivery arriving for her company while she finished important call upstairs. Before he could answer, Mommy interrupted immediately. My son is not houseboy. Desmond chuckled weakly and added, Actually, I wanted to rest today. CHIAMAKA stared at him silently for a few seconds because the same man once carried her handbag around the house proudly just to impress her. No problem, she replied quietly before walking away. Upstairs in her room, she sat on the edge of her bed thinking deeply. For the first time since Desmond entered her life, small discomfort settled properly inside her heart. But immediately another voice inside her head reminded her, it's just his mother. Respect your elders. CHIAMAKA had been raised properly. She believed strongly in respecting older people no matter how difficult they behaved. So each time Mommy crossed boundaries, CHIAMAKA swallowed irritation and remained polite. She kept convincing herself the situation was temporary. She's older, she told herself repeatedly. Maybe this is just how she behaves. Meanwhile, Mommy continued expanding her unofficial authority inside the mansion boldly. She now entered kitchen anytime she wanted and inspected pots dramatically. She rearranged living room pillows because, according to her, rich people's decorations don't make sense. She even corrected how CHIAMAKA's workers addressed Desmond. Call him sir properly, she instructed one afternoon. He's man of the house. Beatrice nearly looked around in confusion, wondering which house exactly the woman meant. Yet, through everything, CHIAMAKA still tried maintaining peace, because deep down she truly cared for Desmond. She remembered the hopeless man she met under rain at the buka and convinced herself he was simply struggling between love for his mother and gratitude toward her. What CHIAMAKA did not realize was that she was no longer helping wounded people recover. She was entertaining 2 professional manipulators inside her own home while they slowly tested how much nonsense she could tolerate before finally breaking. The tension inside Chiamaka's mansion in Lagos continued growing slowly like pot of soup forgotten on fire. And honestly, even the workers in the house had started moving around carefully because nobody ever knew when mommy would suddenly create drama from ordinary situation. Every day brought new complaints, new lectures, and new embarrassing moments for Chiamaka, but she still kept controlling herself because she loved peace and truly did not want disrespect from her own house to become neighborhood entertainment. Deep inside her heart, however, something had already started changing little by little. The sweet feeling she once felt whenever she looked at Desmond was slowly mixing with confusion and disappointment because the more his mother spoke badly to her, the more he seemed to shrink into himself and agree with everything she said like obedient schoolboy trying to win prize for best child behavior. Even simple things had become uncomfortable. If Chiamaka gave instruction to workers, mommy always found one way or another to correct it loudly. If Chiamaka dressed nicely for work, mommy hissed like pressure cooker. If Chiamaka returned home tired and wanted quietness, mommy suddenly became extra loud inside the living room, discussing strangers and criticizing modern women. Yet, despite everything, Chiamaka still remained respectful because she was raised properly and believed elders should be honored no matter how difficult they behaved. One evening, after a particularly stressful day at work, Chiamaka returned home exhausted. Traffic had almost drained the life from her body. One client delayed payment again, another changed furniture colors for the sixth time, and one worker nearly damaged expensive imported tiles. By the time she entered her compound around 7 p.m., all she wanted was hot shower, chilled wine, and silence. But immediately she stepped inside the house, Beatrice, the cleaner, approached her slowly with expression that already looked suspicious. "Madam," she whispered carefully, "Mommy said everybody should gather in the living room by 8 o'clock. Chiamaka stopped walking. "Gather for what?" Beatrice pressed her lips together, trying not to laugh openly. She said it is family discussion. Chiamaka stared at her for several seconds before speaking slowly. "Family discussion?" Beatrice nodded quickly and escaped toward the kitchen before laughter betrayed her completely. Chiamaka stood there confused and irritated at the same time. "What exactly is happening in this house?" she muttered quietly while climbing the stairs. Upstairs in her room, she removed her heels slowly and sat on the edge of her bed feeling tired already. Part of her wanted to ignore whatever nonsense meeting mommy was planning, but another part knew avoiding it would only create bigger drama. Around 8 p.m., she finally walked downstairs wearing comfortable home clothes and found one of the most ridiculous sights she had ever seen in her life. Mommy had transformed the living room into something that looked like village court session. The woman sat boldly in the center sofa with legs crossed proudly and one wrapper tied firmly around her chest like a respected elder preparing to settle land dispute. Desmond sat beside her looking unusually serious, nodding occasionally before any conversation had even started properly. The center table had been cleared completely except for one bottle of water and 2 glasses positioned dramatically like official meeting arrangement. Even the television was switched off. The atmosphere felt so serious that Beatrice nearly injured herself trying not to laugh while pretending to dust shelves nearby. Beams remained inside kitchen doorway peeping carefully because even she wanted to understand what kind of madness was about to happen. Chiamaka paused near the staircase and looked around slowly. "What is going on?" she asked calmly. Mommy adjusted herself on the sofa importantly. "Sit down first," she said with deep authority. Chiamaka almost laughed from disbelief but controlled herself and sat opposite them quietly. For a few seconds, nobody spoke. Mommy cleared her throat dramatically like politician preparing national broadcast. Desmond adjusted his sitting position seriously. Chiamaka looked from mother to son and suddenly felt a strange amusement rising inside her chest because the entire scene looked too ridiculous to be real. Finally, Mommy began speaking. "Chiamaka," she said slowly while folding her hands together, "this discussion is for your own good." Chiamaka blinked once. "My own good?" "Yes," Mommy continued proudly. "As older person in this house, it is my duty to correct you where necessary."
Beatrice quickly bent her head pretending to arrange flowers because she knew Laughter wanted to disgrace her publicly. Chiamaka noticed the cleaner's shaking shoulders and nearly smiled despite herself. "Okay, ma," she replied calmly. "I'm listening." Mommy nodded seriously, like teacher pleased with obedient student. "First of all," she began, "you need to learn humility." The sentence entered the room heavily. Chiamaka stared quietly for a few seconds, trying to process what she had just heard. "Excuse me?" she asked carefully. Mommy leaned forward immediately. "A woman who has too much money starts behaving like man if she's not careful." Desmond nodded beside her. "Exactly," he murmured softly. Chiamaka slowly placed the glass of water in her hand back on the table because suddenly she felt afraid she might accidentally throw it at somebody. "I don't understand," she said calmly, though irritation already burned inside her chest. Mommy sighed deeply, like disappointed parent. "You walk too confidently." Chiamaka blinked. "What?" "You speak too directly," Mommy continued fearlessly. "And when greeting elders, you don't kneel properly from your heart." At this point, even Beam's inside kitchen covered her mouth completely because Laughter nearly escaped by force. Chiamaka sat frozen, trying to understand whether the woman was joking or serious. Unfortunately, Mommy looked extremely serious. "Also," she continued while counting with fingers now, "successful women must learn softness. Men don't like women who behave too independent." Chiamaka finally laughed softly from pure disbelief. "Ma, I'm honestly confused right now." "Don't be confused," Mommy replied quickly. "I'm helping you become better wife material." Then suddenly she turned sharply toward Desmond. "Tell her," she ordered dramatically. And that was the exact moment Chiamaka's remaining patience nearly died completely. Because this fully grown, unemployed man, this man wearing expensive designer shirts she personally bought for him, this man eating imported cereal and sleeping peacefully under her air conditioner every single night, actually straightened his shoulders and opened his mouth confidently. "Actually, Mommy is right," he said carefully. "Sometimes you behave somehow." Chiamaka almost choked on the water she had just sipped. She coughed immediately while staring at him in complete disbelief. "Sorry?" she asked slowly. Desmond suddenly looked encouraged by his mother's approval. "You can be intimidating sometimes," he explained weakly. "Maybe because of your success." For a few seconds, the room became dangerously silent. Even the air conditioner sounded nervous. Chiamaka stared at him so hard that he shifted uncomfortably on the sofa. But Mommy quickly entered again before silence could produce sense inside her son's head. "Exactly," she declared proudly. "A woman should know how to make man feel like head of home." Chiamaka leaned back slowly and folded her arms. Inside her chest, anger mixed with shock and amusement. Because honestly, the audacity before her looked almost supernatural. "Interesting," she said quietly. Mommy mistook her calmness for agreement and became even more confident immediately. "Let me explain properly," while adjusting her wrapper importantly. "Men want peaceful women, respectful women, not women walking around like governor." Then she turned lovingly toward Desmond. "My son needs soft wife." Desmond nodded seriously like relationship expert with 15 years marriage experience instead of unemployed man living inside another person's house. Mommy continued speaking without stopping. "In my time, women woke up early to serve husbands with joy. Women respected men naturally." Then she suddenly started describing imaginary village women with dramatic passion. "There are girls in village who wake up by 4 a.m. happily. They pound yam before sunrise. They kneel while serving food. They worship husbands like kings." As she spoke, her eyes remained fixed directly on Chiamaka like wicked mother-in-law during Nollywood audition. "Those are real women," she concluded proudly. "Not all these modern girls shouting career, career every day." Desmond immediately nodded again. "True." Chiamaka turned slowly toward him. "True?" she repeated carefully. Desmond suddenly became brave because his mother sat beside him like spiritual bodyguard. "I mean, balance is important," he explained. "Men still want respect." Chiamaka stared at him silently. This was the same man who once looked at her with gratitude and emotion while calling her his savior beside the swimming pool. Now he sat there, correcting her inside her own living room because his mother coughed beside him. The transformation shocked her deeply. Mommy continued her speech happily, completely enjoying herself. "A good wife should not be too proud because of money. Money comes and goes. Today you have, tomorrow another person has." Then she looked around the mansion meaningfully. Material things are not everything.
Beatrice nearly dropped cleaning cloth from laughter because the same woman saying material things were not important spent every afternoon admiring Chiamaka's expensive decorations and calculating furniture prices loudly. Chiamaka noticed the cleaner struggling and almost laughed herself from the ridiculousness of the entire situation. But anger still sat heavily inside her chest that night. The sweet, humble man she rescued from suffering was slowly disappearing whenever his mother entered the room, and in his place stood somebody weak, childish, and desperate for approval, no matter how foolish the situation became. Still, Chiamaka controlled herself because she refused to lose dignity inside foolish argument. She simply sat there, quietly, while Mommy continued talking endlessly about good women, and Desmond kept agreeing eagerly beside her like puppy desperate for biscuit, while deep inside, disappointment settled heavily inside Chiamaka's chest for the first time since she brought him into her home. As the weeks continued passing inside Chiamaka's mansion in Lagos, the house slowly stopped feeling like peaceful luxury home and started feeling more like comedy theater, where confusion performed morning, afternoon, and night without break, because Mommy had officially settled into her new role as full-time troublemaker with shocking dedication and energy. Every single day came with fresh drama, so ridiculous that even the workers sometimes escaped into the kitchen just to laugh privately before returning with serious faces. The woman complained about everything humanly possible. One morning, she argued with Beatrice for buying the wrong type of toilet tissue because, according to her, rich people tissue is too soft and suspicious. Another day, she fought with the television remote for almost 20 minutes because she accidentally changed the language settings, and suddenly one Korean movie started speaking loudly inside the living room. "Jesus!" she shouted dramatically while pressing buttons aggressively. "This television is possessed." Desmond rushed downstairs immediately, like emergency had happened, only to discover his mother battling foreign subtitles with pure hatred. Instead of laughing normally like grown adult, he actually sat beside her seriously trying to fix the spiritual confusion inside the television, while Mommy continued complaining that modern electronics were created to frustrate old people. Chiamaka watched the entire scene from the staircase silently with a cup of coffee in her hand, and honestly, she no longer knew whether she was living inside mansion or inside permanent stage play. Every day now carried some form of public embarrassment because Mommy loved attention naturally and behaved like retired actress desperately trying to revive career. The woman could not enter any room quietly. If she sneezed, everybody in the house heard it. If she laughed, neighbors probably heard too. Even her slipper slapped the floor dramatically whenever she walked like background soundtrack announcing villain entrance in Nollywood movie. Chiamaka kept trying to remain patient because she still believed respect for elders mattered, but inside her heart, exhaustion had already started growing heavily. She barely recognized her own peaceful home anymore. One afternoon, things became especially embarrassing when Chiamaka invited 3 important business partners to the mansion for lunch meeting. She had spent the entire morning preparing carefully because the clients were wealthy hotel owners interested in hiring her company for a large interior decoration contract. It was a very important opportunity worth millions. The dining room looked beautiful that day. Fresh flowers decorated the table, expensive plates and wine glasses reflected softly under chandelier lights. Beams prepared grilled fish, fried rice, salad, and different drinks while Beatrice polished every corner until the room practically shined. Chiamaka herself looked elegant in fitted cream dress and soft makeup as she welcomed her guests warmly into the mansion. The meeting started perfectly. The clients admired the house decoration openly and complimented her taste repeatedly. One man even said, "If your own house looks this good, then our hotel project is safe." Chiamaka smiled professionally and continued discussing designs confidently while everybody enjoyed food and conversation. For the first time in many weeks, the house almost felt normal again. Unfortunately, peace inside that mansion never lasted long anymore. Halfway through the lunch meeting, while everybody discussed furniture options seriously, Mommy suddenly entered the dining room without invitation, carrying one small bottle of prayer oil in her hand and wearing oversized wrapper with dramatic confidence. The room became quiet immediately. Chiamaka froze internally. "Good afternoon, everybody," Mommy announced loudly while smiling suspiciously. The guests greeted politely, though confusion already covered their faces. Chiamaka quickly stood up. "Ma, we're having meeting right now." But Mommy ignored her completely and walked closer to the table while shaking the prayer oil bottle gently. "I just want to say something small," she declared. Chiamaka felt her blood pressure rising, slowly. One female guest smiled awkwardly and reached for water immediately, like somebody sensing danger approaching. Mommy looked around the table importantly before speaking again. "You know, rich women nowadays have one problem." Chiamaka nearly closed her eyes from second-hand embarrassment already. "Ma!" But Mommy continued fearlessly. "Many successful women delay marriage too much because of career and money." One male guest coughed suddenly, trying to hide laughter, while another picked up his phone quickly, pretending urgent call had entered. Chiamaka stood frozen beside the table, wishing heaven would temporarily swallow her whole. "And when woman delays marriage too long," Mommy continued loudly while waving prayer oil dramatically, "sometimes spiritual problems are involved." One guest nearly sprayed juice across the table from suppressed laughter. Another woman stared at her plate with the determination of somebody avoiding eye contact during public madness. Chiamaka forced a painful smile. Excuse us one moment," she said quickly while trying to guide Mommy away gently. But the woman pulled back proudly. "I'm helping you," she announced. "This prayer oil is powerful. One woman used it and got husband in 6 months. At that point, even Bim's inside kitchen nearly collapsed from silent laughter, while Beatrice disappeared completely because she knew one more second inside that dining room would destroy her professionalism forever. Chiamaka finally managed to escort Mommy outside politely, though every muscle in her body screamed from embarrassment. The moment they entered hallway, Chiamaka lowered her voice sharply. "Ma, please, this is business meeting." Mommy looked offended immediately. "So, I was only speaking truth. You cannot interrupt meetings like that." "Why are you ashamed of prayer?" Mommy demanded loudly. "Is this wrong to help you?" Chiamaka closed her eyes briefly and inhaled deeply before speaking again. "Please, just allow me finish with my guests." Mommy hissed slightly and walked away, muttering, "Young women hit correction nowadays." Back inside dining room, Chiamaka apologized repeatedly to her guests while forcing never smile. Thankfully, the clients found the whole situation funny instead of offensive. One man even laughed and said, "Your mother-in-law is very passionate." Chiamaka almost corrected him immediately, but stopped herself halfway because honestly, the explanation would require too much energy. After the guests finally left hours later, Chiamaka sat alone in the living room, rubbing her forehead tiredly. She had never felt such professional embarrassment inside her own house before. Yet, instead of apologizing afterward, Desmond actually defended his mother confidently that evening. "You should try to understand old people," he told Chiamaka while eating fruit comfortably on the sofa. Chiamaka stared at him slowly. "Understand what exactly?" she asked carefully. "She embarrassed me in front of important clients." Desmond shrugged casually. "She meant well." Chiamaka laughed softly from disbelief. "Desmond, your mother entered business meeting with prayer oil." "She was only trying to help." "Help who?" Chiamaka asked. "Me or your mother's acting career?" Desmond frowned immediately. "Don't insult my mother." Chiamaka looked at him silently for several seconds before standing up quietly and walking away because honestly, she feared her mouth might suddenly become dangerous if the conversation continued. Meanwhile, Desmond himself had now become fully comfortable inside soft life to the point where job searching looked more like distant hobby than urgent responsibility. At first, after moving into the mansion, he used to wake up early, dress properly and send applications seriously. But as weeks turned into months and comfort settled deeply into his body, motivation slowly disappeared completely. Why stress when air conditioner worked perfectly? Why struggle when breakfast arrived every morning? The man now spent most afternoons sleeping peacefully under cold air conditioner while pressing phone lazily or watching football highlights loudly beside Mommy. Sometimes Chiamaka returned from stressful work meetings and found both mother and son sitting together in matching positions on the sofa, discussing football players with the seriousness of national sports analysts. "That referee was blind," Mommy shouted passionately one afternoon, while Desmond laughed loudly beside her. "Exactly, Mommy." Chiamaka stood at the entrance holding handbag and simply stared at them quietly because honestly, the scene looked like retired couple enjoying pension life together.
The funniest part was how Mommy treated Desmond like 8-year-old child instead of fully grown adult. The woman spoon-fed him fruits openly sometimes while shouting proudly, "My son has suffered." One afternoon, CHIAMAKA walked into living room and nearly stopped moving from shock when she saw Mommy feeding Desmond watermelon pieces directly into his mouth while he watched football comfortably. "Open mouth," Mommy ordered lovingly. Desmond obeyed immediately without shame. CHIAMAKA blinked twice. "Seriously?" she asked slowly. Mommy looked up proudly. "My son needs strength." Desmond laughed carelessly. "Mommy, leave me." But he still opened mouth for another fruit piece. CHIAMAKA walked upstairs quietly because honestly, her brain needed recovery after that sight. Another day, she overheard Mommy shouting dramatically at Beatrice because the woman served Desmond tea that was too hot for his delicate throat. "Do you want to burn my son?" she demanded loudly, while poor Beatrice stood there holding tray like confused hostage. Slowly, the entire mansion adjusted around their strange mother-son relationship while CHIAMAKA watched in growing disbelief. Yet anytime she gently tried discussing responsibility with Desmond, the man suddenly became defensive, like somebody fighting oppression war. One evening, after returning from work exhausted again, CHIAMAKA found Desmond sleeping heavily on the sofa around 4 p.m. with football channel still playing loudly. Empty snack plates surrounded him, while one of her expensive throw pillows rested under his head. She stood there quietly for moments before shaking him gently. "Desmond?" He opened eyes lazily. "Did you send the CV updates I reminded you about yesterday?" Immediately, his expression changed slightly. "I was going to." CHIAMAKA sighed softly. "You've been saying that for 1 week." Desmond sat up slowly, looking irritated already. "I'm trying." "Trying what exactly?" CHIAMAKA asked calmly. "Because lately, all I see is football and sleeping." Desmond frowned immediately. "So now you are monitoring my life?" CHIAMAKA blinked in surprise. "Excuse me?" "Every time it's job, responsibility, application," he complained. "You are putting pressure on me." CHIAMAKA stared at him quietly because the irony nearly made her laugh openly. "Pressure?" she repeated slowly. "Desmond, you are living comfortably here for free." His face hardened further. "So because you have money now, you want to control me?" At that exact moment, even Beatrice, who was cleaning nearby, paused briefly in complete disbelief before quickly pretending to continue dusting television stand. CHIAMAKA looked at Desmond carefully, trying to understand whether he truly heard himself speaking. "Control you?" she repeated. "I'm encouraging you to get your life back together." "You keep reminding me that this is your house," he snapped defensively. CHIAMAKA laughed softly from pure shock now. "Desmond, you use my Wi-Fi, my electricity, my food, my toothpaste, even my Netflix account." "See?" he interrupted quickly. "You are counting things now." CHIAMAKA actually looked around briefly because honestly, she wondered if hidden cameras existed somewhere filming comedy show. "Unbelievable," she murmured quietly. Desmond stood up fully now, looking offended. "Money is not everything, CHIAMAKA." "Nobody said it was." "Then stop acting like you own people because you help them." CHIAMAKA stared at him long and hard, while deep disappointment settled heavier inside her chest. This was no longer the grateful, humble man she met at the buka. Comfort had changed him completely, or maybe this arrogant version was always hiding underneath the suffering face. Behind them, Mommy suddenly entered living room at perfect timing, like actress arriving for favorite scene. "What's happening?" she asked immediately. Desmond sighed dramatically and shook his head. "Nothing, Mommy." But Mommy already sensed opportunity for emotional performance. "My son," she said softly while touching his shoulder. "Don't stress yourself. You have suffered enough." Then she turned towards CHIAMAKA with expression full of accusation. "A man cannot heal under pressure." CHIAMAKA simply looked at both of them quietly because honestly, words had started failing her little by little inside that house. That Sunday started peacefully inside CHIAMAKA's mansion in Lagos. But by evening, it would become the exact day respect finally died completely inside the house. The morning had actually looked normal at first. CHIAMAKA woke up early, dressed beautifully for church in elegant Ankara gown with matching heels and soft makeup, while Mommy wore one heavily decorated lace outfit with giant gele that looked powerful enough to block satellite signal. Desmond dressed in white senator outfits CHIAMAKA bought for him weeks earlier, looking fresh, handsome, and completely comfortable inside a lifestyle he no longer deserved. The three of them attended church together because Mommy insisted strongly that family must worship together, even though half the church service usually became opportunity for her to monitor other people's clothes, cars, and marriages instead of listening to sermon. CHIAMAKA sat quietly throughout the service, trying to enjoy peace and focus on God, because honestly, church had become the only place where nobody argued with her inside the past few weeks. But Mommy spent most of the service turning neck around like security camera, observing everybody entering the church compound. Every time one younger woman arrived in shiny SUV with driver opening doors respectfully, Mommy's face tightened little by little. She watched wealthy couples walk inside holding hands. She watched younger women greeting proudly beside successful husbands. And slowly, jealousy entered her body like hot pepper. After service ended, the situation became worse when one church woman greeted CHIAMAKA warmly near the parking lot and admired her car openly. "Ah, CHIAMAKA, your new Range Rover is beautiful," the woman said excitedly. "God is blessing you seriously." CHIAMAKA smiled politely. "Thank you, ma." But before they could continue talking, Mommy suddenly interrupted sharply. "Money is not everything," she announced loudly. The church woman blinked awkwardly and quickly excused herself before unnecessary drama entered her Sunday afternoon. On the drive home, the atmosphere inside the car became strangely tense. Mommy sat at the back seat, muttering under her breath while staring outside the window with irritated expression. Desmond kept checking her face through the mirror nervously. CHIAMAKA drove quietly, already sensing trouble gathering somewhere nearby like dark cloud before rainfall. The moment they entered the mansion compound, Mommy stepped out of the car aggressively and slammed the door harder than necessary. One gateman greeted respectfully. "Welcome, ma." Mommy barely answered. Then she marched inside the house carrying anger proudly like handbag. CHIAMAKA sighed quietly while removing her heels near the entrance. What happened again? She wondered silently inside her head. Less than 10 minutes later, the trouble finally exploded fully. CHIAMAKA had just changed into comfortable clothes and sat down with a glass of cold juice, hoping for a peaceful afternoon, when Mommy suddenly started shouting from the living room. "Desmond!" Her voice echoed through the mansion dramatically. "Come here now!" Desmond rushed downstairs immediately, like emergency alarm had sounded. "What happened, Mommy?" CHIAMAKA remained seated quietly nearby, because honestly, she no longer had energy for surprise. Mommy sat heavily on the center sofa, breathing angrily while adjusting her wrapper. "I'm tired, completely tired." Desmond looked confused. "Of what?" Mommy pointed around the mansion aggressively. "This nonsense life." CHIAMAKA slowly lowered her glass. "Excuse me?" Mommy turned toward her sharply. "Yes, this house has too much pride inside it." Desmond sat beside his mother immediately, looking serious already. CHIAMAKA watched both of them quietly while warning bells started ringing loudly inside her chest. Mommy continued without control. "Today in church, I saw young women respecting their husbands properly." She shook her head sadly. "But nowadays, women with small money think they are above men." CHIAMAKA inhaled slowly and placed the juice glass carefully on the table because she already knew dangerous conversation had arrived again. "Ma, what exactly is the issue?" she asked calmly. Mommy laughed bitterly. "The issue is pride." Then she pointed directly towards CHIAMAKA. "You show off wealth too much." CHIAMAKA blinked in disbelief. "Show off?" "Yes," Mommy snapped loudly. "Everywhere, car, house, designer clothes. You make my son look small." CHIAMAKA stared at her quietly for several seconds before speaking carefully. "How exactly am I making him look small?" "Because woman should never rise above man," Mommy declared proudly. "A man must always feel like head." Desmond nodded slowly beside her, like a rechargeable fan running on low battery. That small movement annoyed CHIAMAKA more than the shouting itself. "Interesting," she murmured softly.
Mommy leaned forward aggressively now because once attention entered her body, the woman became unstoppable. A woman must never think she's above man because she has money, she announced loudly enough for everybody in the house to hear. Inside the kitchen, Bims and Beatrice exchanged tired looks immediately because they already recognized drama season when it arrived. Even one gateman outside paused near the window after hearing the shouting begin. Mommy continued passionately. "There are still good girls in village," she said proudly. "Girls who wake up early, girls who obey husbands, girls who respect mothers-in-law naturally without pride." Each sentence came out louder than the previous one, while she stared directly at CHIAMAKA like woman auditioning for a wicked mother-in-law. "Not all these career women speaking English up and down," she added sharply. CHIAMAKA sat silently at first because honestly, she wanted to see how far the madness would go before reality finally entered somebody's brain. But to her greatest disappointment, Desmond sat beside his mother nodding seriously through everything. "Mommy is right small," he added carefully. CHIAMAKA turned slowly toward him. "Right about what exactly?" Desmond cleared his throat awkwardly. "I mean, relationship needs balance." "Balance?" CHIAMAKA repeated quietly. "You suddenly became relationship expert?" Desmond frowned immediately. "Why are you talking like that?" CHIAMAKA laughed softly from disbelief. "Because I'm confused, very confused." Mommy clapped her hands together dramatically. "You see, this is exactly what I'm saying. Pride." Then she looked lovingly toward her son. "My son deserves peaceful woman, respectful woman, not woman arguing every time." CHIAMAKA almost laughed openly now because the irony nearly injured her. "Arguing?" she asked. "Ma, you've been insulting me inside my own house for weeks." "Correction is not insult," shouted Mommy immediately. "Young women hate truth." Desmond sighed heavily beside her, like tired husband in a bad marriage. "Can we all just calm down?" he asked weakly. CHIAMAKA stared at him carefully because the performance happening before her looked almost unreal. This same man once cried emotionally beside swimming pool, thanking her for saving him from suffering. Now he sat comfortably inside her mansion, behaving like oppressed landlord. Mommy suddenly stood up dramatically and began pacing around the living room with full emotional energy. "I suffered to raise my son alone," she declared loudly. "No woman will come and control him because of money." CHIAMAKA folded her arms slowly. "Nobody is controlling your son." "You are!" Mommy shouted immediately. "Everywhere, job, responsibility, application. You make him feel useless." CHIAMAKA laughed softly again because honestly the statement sounded too ridiculous. "He is unemployed," she replied calmly. "Should I clap for that?" Desmond's face tightened immediately. "See, you always use my situation against me." "Desmond," CHIAMAKA said slowly, "you sleep till afternoon every day." "Because I'm mentally stressed," he defended quickly. Mommy rushed to support him immediately. "Exactly, depression is real." CHIAMAKA almost looked around for hidden camera again because truly she no longer understood whether this was real life or permanent comedy production. "Depression," she repeated. "From what? Air conditioner stress?" Desmond stood up immediately, looking offended. "You don't understand what men go through." CHIAMAKA stared at him in complete disbelief. "Men?" she repeated quietly. "Which men exactly? Because currently you and your mother behave like retired couple living on my salary." That sentence landed heavily inside the room. Even the air conditioner suddenly sounded louder. For one brief second, silence covered everywhere. Then Mommy exploded fully. "This house has too much pride," she screamed while pointing aggressively at CHIAMAKA. "Too much pride." Beatrice froze near the dining area holding tray, while Bim slowly peeped from kitchen doorway because everybody sensed danger increasing rapidly now. Mommy turned sharply toward Desmond with dramatic authority. "Tell her," she ordered loudly. "Tell her to leave if she cannot submit." The sentence entered the room like stone thrown through glass. Even CHIAMAKA herself became still for 1 second because honestly, she expected Desmond to finally wake up and stop the madness at that point. She expected him to remember reality. She expected shame to enter his body finally. Instead, the man adjusted himself comfortably on the sofa, cleared his throat seriously, and crossed completely from foolishness into disgrace. "Maybe," he began slowly while avoiding direct eye contact, "maybe it's best you give us some space for now." Silence fell immediately after those words. Deep, dangerous silence. The kind of silence that comes before explosion. Outside the mansion, the sound of generator hummed steadily in the compound. Somewhere upstairs, one tap dripped quietly. Beatrice remained frozen with tray in her hand. Even Mommy herself looked briefly surprised that her son actually said it aloud. CHIAMAKA did not move for several seconds. She simply stared at Desmond quietly while something inside her changed completely. The disbelief on her face slowly disappeared and was replaced by something colder, calmer, and more dangerous. She looked at the man sitting comfortably inside her own mansion, suggesting she leave to give them space, and suddenly every warning sign she ignored over the past weeks gathered together clearly inside her mind. The pity she once felt for him vanished slowly. The affection disappeared quietly. All that remained was pure realization. Meanwhile, Desmond still sat there trying to look important, as if he was king of the mansion and CHIAMAKA was tenant owing rent. Nobody moved. Nobody spoke. The atmosphere itself seemed to tighten slowly, while everybody in the house sensed that something serious had finally broken beyond repair. For several long seconds after Desmond told her to give them space, the entire living room inside the mansion in Lagos remained painfully silent, and honestly, the atmosphere became so heavy that even the air conditioner seemed afraid to make noise. CHIAMAKA sat completely still on the sofa, staring quietly at both mother and son, while her mind replayed every foolish thing she had tolerated since the day she brought Desmond into her home. She remembered the rainy evening at the buka. She remembered the shame on his face when he could not afford ordinary coke. She remembered buying him clothes, opening her house to him, defending him, feeding him, helping him search for jobs, and treating him with kindness when everybody else abandoned him. Then she looked at the same man, now sitting comfortably inside her living room, telling her to give them space, as if he was landlord and she was unwanted visitor disturbing family gathering. The more she stared at him, the calmer her face became, and somehow that calmness became more frightening than anger itself. Even Mommy, who normally enjoyed drama like sport, shifted slightly on the sofa because something about CHIAMAKA's silence suddenly felt dangerous. Desmond too became uncomfortable little by little. He expected argument, he expected shouting, he expected emotional reaction, but instead, CHIAMAKA simply kept looking at him quietly, with expression that slowly drained confidence from his body. Finally, after what felt like forever, CHIAMAKA laughed softly. Not loud laughter, just one small quiet laugh filled with disbelief and disappointment. Then she stood up slowly, adjusted the silk robe she wore over her fitted home clothes, and calmly picked up the glass of juice from the table before placing it down again carefully. "Okay," she said softly. That was all. Just one simple word. Mommy immediately mistook the calmness for surrender. "Yes," she said proudly while sitting straighter. "A woman must think about herself sometimes." Desmond swallowed awkwardly but remained silent because honestly, even he no longer understood the situation properly. CHIAMAKA did not answer anybody. She simply turned around gracefully and began climbing the staircase slowly, in expensive slippers without another word. The sound of her footsteps against the marble stairs echoed softly through the silent mansion, while everybody watched her disappear upstairs. Mommy folded her arms proudly after she disappeared. "Good," she muttered. "Maybe now peace will enter this house." Desmond rubbed his palms together nervously. "Mommy, maybe we pushed too hard." Mommy immediately hissed. "Nonsense! Women only respect strong men." But despite her confidence, even she sounded less certain now because something about CHIAMAKA's silence disturbed her deeply. Upstairs, inside her room, CHIAMAKA closed the door quietly behind her and stood still for a few moments, staring around the beautiful bedroom she worked hard to build for herself. The giant bed, the elegant decorations, the expensive curtains, everything in the room represented years of hard work, sleepless nights, stressful business meetings, disappointments, sacrifices, and determination. Nobody gave her this life freely. She fought for it. Slowly, she walked toward the wardrobe and opened it calmly. Her movements remained smooth and controlled, but inside her chest, disappointment burned heavily like fire. She could not believe she ignored so many warning signs because of pity and loneliness. She remembered every moment she defended Desmond in her mind, even when his behavior became embarrassing. She remembered excusing his weakness because she thought he was struggling emotionally. Meanwhile, the man had slowly become entitled enough to suggest she leave her own house. CHIAMAKA laughed softly again while shaking her head. Unbelievable, she whispered quietly. Then she pulled out 2 large travel bags from one corner of the wardrobe and placed them on the floor. Downstairs, Mommy continued talking proudly like politician after winning election. That girl needed correction long ago, she declared loudly while adjusting her wrapper. Money entered her head too much. Desmond still looked uncomfortable. Maybe we should calm down when she comes back. Mommy scoffed immediately. You are too soft. That is your problem. Then she pointed at him. A man must control his house. At that exact moment, Beatrice passed through the hallway carrying tray. And honestly, the cleaner almost laughed aloud because hearing the phrase, control his house, from 2 people who did not own one single tile inside the mansion sounded like comedy skit written by hungry scriptwriters. Meanwhile, upstairs, CHIAMAKA opened the guest room calmly. The room still carried signs of the chaos Mommy brought into the house. Wrappers spread carelessly across chairs. Plastic bags rested near the wardrobe. Half-empty perfume bottles crowded the table. CHIAMAKA looked around quietly before bending down and beginning to pack. She folded clothes neatly and placed them inside one travel bag with steady movements. Then she packed Desmond's shoes, watches, perfumes, and everything else she personally bought for him. No anger, no shouting, just cold calmness. Every second downstairs, Mommy continued speaking proudly without realizing disaster was arranging itself upstairs with zipper sounds. My son deserves better woman, she announced again. Simple village girl, respectful girl. Desmond nodded weakly, though confidence had started leaving his body slowly. About 20 minutes later, footsteps finally sounded from upstairs again. The living room became quiet immediately. Then everybody turned toward the staircase and saw CHIAMAKA descending slowly with 2 large travel bags dragging behind her across the marble floor. The sound echoed heavily through the mansion. Even the gate man near the entrance peeped inside slightly because the atmosphere suddenly changed completely. CHIAMAKA's face remained calm, too calm. She dragged the bag steadily across the living room until she reached the center table where Mommy and Desmond still sat. Then, without drama or raised voice, she dropped both bags directly in front of Desmond. The bags landed heavily on the floor. Pack your things, she said calmly, and leave my house. The sentence entered the room like thunder. Complete confusion scattered everywhere immediately. Mommy blinked repeatedly as if network disappeared inside her brain suddenly. Desmond froze completely. Even Beams dropped spoon inside kitchen from shock. For several seconds, nobody spoke. Then slowly, Mommy looked around the living room, then at the bags, then at CHIAMAKA again. Wait, she said slowly. Your house? CHIAMAKA looked directly at her. Yes, she replied calmly. My house. Mommy frowned deeply in confusion. What do you mean, your house? CHIAMAKA folded her arms. Exactly what I said. Silence followed immediately. Mommy turned sharply toward Desmond now. What is she saying? Desmond scratched his head nervously. Sweat suddenly appeared around his forehead. Mommy, answer me, she snapped loudly. Whose house is this? Desmond swallowed hard. For the first time since entering the mansion, real shame finally touched his face properly. He looked at CHIAMAKA briefly, then back at his mother, whose expression had already started changing slowly from confidence into confusion. Finally, Desmond spoke in a weak, embarrassed voice. The house belongs to CHIAMAKA. The silence after that confession felt almost physical. Mommy stared at her son without blinking. What? She asked quietly. Desmond rubbed his palms nervously. After I lost my job, the bank repossessed my apartment. Mommy's mouth slowly opened. What? And my car, Desmond added quietly. They took that too. Mommy blinked again. Desmond? His voice became lower with every sentence. My friend stopped helping me. I had nowhere stable to stay. Chiamaka remained standing quietly beside the bags, watching everything calmly, while reality finally entered the room properly. Desmond continued speaking shamefully now because there was no point pretending anymore. I met Chiamaka at one buka during rain. She helped me. She brought me here. Mommy's eyes widened slowly. Brought you here? She gave me somewhere to stay. You mean, Mommy pointed around the mansion with shaking fingers, this house is not yours? Desmond lowered his head completely. No. The wall clock ticked loudly inside the silence that followed. Even the house itself seemed shocked. Mommy stared at her son like a woman trying to wake from bad dream. Then why didn't you tell me? She whispered. Desmond looked deeply embarrassed now. I didn't know how. Mommy turned slowly toward Chiamaka, then back toward her son again, as pieces of reality finally arranged themselves inside her head, one after another. Wait, she said weakly. So the clothes? Desmond nodded shamefully. She bought them. The car you drive sometimes? Her car. The room? Her guest room. The food? Desmond closed his eyes briefly. Everything. Mommy's mouth remained open like somebody paused her remotely. She looked around the mansion again, this time with completely different eyes. Suddenly, every memory replayed inside her head painfully. Every insult, every lecture, every complaint, every moment she behaved like queen of property she did not own. Even the workers standing quietly nearby now looked different to her because realization finally slapped her hard across the face. Beatrice quickly turned away, pretending to clean, because honestly, if she looked directly at Mommy any longer, laughter would destroy her career permanently. Mommy sat down slowly on the sofa, like her knees suddenly became weak. Jesus Christ, she whispered. Desmond looked completely broken now. The false confidence he carried earlier had vanished entirely. He stared at the floor shamefully while sweat covered his face. I was trying to fix things, he muttered weakly. Chiamaka finally spoke again calmly. Fix things? Her voice remained soft, but every word landed heavily. By asking me to leave my own house? Desmond looked up quickly. Chiamaka, listen. She raised one hand slightly. No, let's not pretend anymore. Her eyes moved slowly between mother and son. Both of you became very comfortable disrespecting me because you thought silence meant weakness. Nobody answered. The silence inside the mansion became so loud that even the wall clock suddenly sounded judgmental. Mommy still sat frozen, with mouth slightly open, while reality continued beating her from every direction at once. The silence inside the mansion in Lagos after Desmond confessed the truth lasted only for a short moment before complete madness changed direction with the speed of Lagos traffic officer collecting bribe during rush hour. Because the exact second reality entered Mommy's head properly, her entire behavior transformed so fast that even the house workers nearly respected the talent. Just 30 seconds earlier, the woman had been sitting proudly like Queen Mother of ancient kingdom, insulting Chiamaka and demanding submission inside another person's mansion. But now that she finally understood the truth, she suddenly clutched her chest dramatically and gasped like actress discovering her husband had second family in village. Jesus Christ, she cried loudly while looking around the living room in panic. My daughter! Chiamaka blinked slowly because honestly, hearing the phrase, my daughter, from this same woman almost made her laugh immediately. Mommy stood up quickly and rushed toward her with trembling hands. Why didn't you explain since? She demanded emotionally, as if Chiamaka owed her PowerPoint presentation about property ownership before allowing her insult festival to begin. Chiamaka simply folded her arms quietly and stared at her without expression. Explain what exactly? She asked calmly. Mommy swallowed awkwardly. That the house belongs to you. Chiamaka raised one eyebrow slowly. So, before respecting somebody, you first need to see house documents? The question hit Mommy directly, but the woman refused to surrender immediately. Instead, she forced a nervous laugh and touched Chiamaka's arm lightly. No, don't misunderstand me. I was only protecting my son. At that exact moment, even Beatrice almost coughed from suppressed laughter because honestly, the speed of transformation happening before her eyes looked supernatural. Desmond, too, immediately abandoned all the fake confidence and masculinity he carried earlier. The same man who sat proudly on the sofa telling Chiamaka to give them space now looked like student caught cheating during final examination. Sweat covered his forehead completely while he scratched his neck nervously. Baby, he started weakly. Chiamaka turned sharply toward him immediately. Don't call me baby.
Desmond swallowed hard. Chiamaka, please, listen to me. I've listened enough. I was under pressure, he muttered shamefully. Pressure? Chiamaka repeated softly. From what? Free accommodation? Desmond lowered his head immediately, while Mommy quickly entered the conversation again, trying desperately to save the situation. My daughter, please don't be angry, she begged, while forcing emotional face. You know men go through things sometimes. Chiamaka stared at her in disbelief. Interesting. So now I'm your daughter? Mommy laughed awkwardly. Of course, since the first day. At that point, even Beam's inside kitchen nearly bent over from silent laughter because everybody in the house remembered very clearly how Mommy spent weeks behaving like Chiamaka was an unwanted stranger, squatting illegally beside her son. Chiamaka slowly walked toward one sofa and sat down calmly while crossing her legs elegantly. Something about her calmness made both mother and son more nervous because neither of them knew what she planned next. Please sit, she said softly while looking at them. The tone sounded polite but somehow dangerous at the same time. Mommy and Desmond sat down slowly opposite her, looking like people waiting for court judgment. Nearby, Beatrice pretended to clean the same center table for almost 10 minutes straight because she refused to miss even one word of the drama. Even one gateman outside moved closer to the window carefully, pretending to arrange flower pots while listening shamelessly. Chiamaka looked at both mother and son quietly for a few moments before finally speaking again. You know what amazes me? She asked softly. Nobody answered. The confidence, she laughed lightly while shaking her head. The unbelievable confidence. Desmond rubbed his sweaty palms together nervously. Chiamaka, please. But she raised one finger gently. No, let me talk now. The room became silent immediately. Chiamaka leaned back against the sofa comfortably while staring directly at Desmond. I met you at a buka, unable to buy coke. Desmond looked down in shame. I brought you into my home because I pitied you. I know. I clothed you, fed you, helped you, defended you. Her voice remained calm, but every sentence entered the room heavily. Then somehow, after all that, you reached a point where you sat inside my living room and suggested I leave my own house. Desmond closed his eyes briefly from embarrassment. I'm sorry. No, Chiamaka replied quietly. You are ashamed because truth came out. That's different. Mommy quickly grabbed the opportunity to perform emotional mother role again. My daughter, please forgive him, she begged dramatically. My son has suffered too much already. Chiamaka suddenly burst into laughter, real laughter this time, loud, uncontrollable laughter that surprised everybody in the room. She laughed so hard she nearly bent forward slightly while tears entered her eyes. Mommy and Desmond stared at her in confusion. Sorry, Chiamaka said between laughter. I'm trying to understand this. She wiped her eyes slowly. You are protecting a grown, unemployed man from the woman paying his bills? Even Beatrice finally lost control briefly and turned away quickly because laughter nearly escaped her mouth completely. Chiamaka continued laughing softly while shaking her head. Honestly, this entire situation sounds too ridiculous even for Nigerian movies. Mommy looked embarrassed now but still refused to stop begging. I was only thinking about my son's future. Future? Chiamaka repeated. The same future where he sleeps till afternoon watching football with your hand feeding him watermelon? Desmond looked deeply uncomfortable now, while Mommy forced a weak smile. He was emotionally stressed. Emotionally stressed? Chiamaka laughed again. That man has been on permanent vacation inside my house. Desmond finally stood up suddenly. Okay, I know I messed up, he admitted weakly, but I really care about you. Chiamaka looked at him calmly. Do you? Desmond nodded quickly. Yes. Interesting. She pointed toward the bags beside the sofa. Then why didn't care stop you from disrespecting me? Desmond opened his mouth but no words came out immediately. Meanwhile, Mommy had now entered full emotional begging mode completely. The same woman who once insulted Chiamaka's clothes, food, confidence, and lifestyle now suddenly sat leaning forward with fake tears threatening to fall any moment. Please don't send us away tonight. Where will we go?
Chiamaka stared at her quietly. The same place you planned for me to go when your son asked me to leave my own house. Mommy pressed hand against her chest immediately. God forbid, we didn't mean it like that. Chiamaka nodded slowly. Exactly, you didn't think at all. The room became quiet again briefly before Chiamaka suddenly smiled to herself like somebody finally understanding complicated joke. Then she looked directly at both mother and son and spoke with full confidence. Honestly, both of you should just marry yourselves. Complete silence followed for half second before Beatrice almost dropped the tray completely from shock. Even Desmond blinked repeatedly. What? He asked weakly. Chiamaka leaned back comfortably. Because this relationship between mother and son has already passed normal level. Mommy gasped loudly. Jesus! But Chiamaka continued fearlessly now because all patience had finally left her body completely. You people behave like jealous couple. She pointed at Mommy. You monitor everything he eats, wears, drinks and breathes. Then she pointed at Desmond. And you obey every nonsense instruction like remote control husband. Outside, near the compound entrance, one gateman accidentally laughed loudly after hearing the statement before quickly covering his mouth. Mommy stood up immediately in outrage. How can you say such thing? Chiamaka shrugged calmly. Am I lying? Desmond tried weakly to defend himself. She's my mother. And you are 30-something years old, Chiamaka replied sharply. Yet your mother still decides whether you drink cold water. Even Beams inside kitchen laughed openly at that point because honestly, the statement was painfully true. Mommy looked completely embarrassed now, while Desmond carried one travel bag slowly like expelled boarding school student. Please, let's talk calmly, he begged weakly. There's nothing left to discuss, Chiamaka replied. I'm tired. Her voice suddenly became more serious and quieter now. Do you know the saddest part? Desmond looked up slowly. I actually wanted to help you rebuild your life. The shame on Desmond's face deepened immediately. I know. But instead of gratitude, both of you brought chaos into my home. Mommy quickly shook her head. No. Misunderstanding only happened because... Please stop, Chiamaka interrupted calmly. For weeks, I tolerated insults, disrespect, manipulation, and nonsense because I kept trying to respect your age. Then she looked directly at Mommy. Meanwhile, you confused kindness for weakness. Mommy opened her mouth again, but no words came out this time because honestly, there was nothing left to defend. Chiamaka stood up slowly now and walked toward the entrance before opening the door wide. Cool evening air entered the living room softly while everybody remained silent. It's over, she said quietly. Desmond looked heartbroken suddenly. Please don't do this. Chiamaka turned toward him calmly. You already did it yourself the moment you forgot whose house you were sitting in. Desmond lowered his head completely while holding the travel bag sadly. Mommy still looked shocked that reality had turned against them so quickly. The same woman who entered the mansion like owner now stood nervously beside the door with Ghana must go mentality returning slowly into her body. Chiamaka, please, Desmond tried again weakly. I can change. Chiamaka smiled softly without warmth. You should focus on changing your address first. Even the gateman outside nearly fell from his chair laughing silently after hearing that statement. While inside the mansion, Desmond stood carrying bags sadly like punished student, still hoping for a miracle. While Mommy whispered urgently beside him, Desmond, say something now. Not realizing that for the first time since they entered the mansion, no amount of talking could save them anymore. The final moments inside the mansion in Lagos carried the kind of silence that usually comes after heavy rain destroys market umbrellas and everybody finally accepts defeat. Because after all the begging, emotional speeches, fake apologies and dramatic sighing, Chiamaka's mind had already closed completely against both mother and son. She stood near the entrance with arms folded calmly, while Desmond still carried the two travel bags, looking like confused refugees suddenly rejected by comfortable country. His face remained full of shame, regret, and panic, while Mommy stood beside him, clutching one wrapper tightly around her chest, as if tighter fabric could somehow fix the disaster they created with their own mouths. Chiamaka, please, Desmond tried again weakly. Can we at least discuss this tomorrow? Chiamaka stared at him quietly without emotion. Tomorrow, she repeated softly. Desmond, if I allow both of you sleep here tonight, by morning your mother will probably organize another family meeting to explain why I should transfer the house document into your name. Even Beatrice laughed openly at that point before quickly covering her mouth and pretending to cough. Mommy shot angry eyes toward the cleaner immediately but lacked the confidence to shout this time because reality had humbled her completely. My daughter, don't speak like that, Mommy begged softly while forcing shaky smile. We are family. CHIAMAKA actually looked around the living room slowly in disbelief before facing her again. Family, she repeated. Interesting, because last time I checked, family members don't ask the owner of the house to leave so they can have space. Desmond sighed heavily and dropped one travel bag on the floor briefly. I made mistake, he admitted quietly. I was angry. CHIAMAKA nodded slowly. And now you are homeless again. The sentence landed heavily on him immediately. Even Mommy winced slightly because the truth hurt badly when spoken plainly. For a few seconds, nobody spoke again. Then Mommy suddenly changed strategy one more time because dramatic women never surrender peacefully. She moved closer to CHIAMAKA with emotional expression and lowered her voice sadly. Please forgive us, she whispered. People make mistakes. CHIAMAKA looked directly into her eyes. Ma, you spent weeks insulting me inside my own house. I was only correcting you. You called me proud. I misunderstood. You called me disrespectful. I didn't know the full story. CHIAMAKA laughed softly. Exactly. You didn't know anything, yet you spoke with confidence every single day. Mommy lowered her head slightly now because honestly there was no defense left. Even Desmond finally looked exhausted from begging. Please, he muttered quietly, just give me another chance. CHIAMAKA shook her head slowly. No. Her voice remained calm but final. The problem is not poverty, Desmond. The problem is entitlement. Desmond looked down immediately. I helped you because I believed you were a good man struggling with life. But the moment comfort entered your body, respect disappeared. The truth hit him painfully because deep down he knew she was right. CHIAMAKA took another slow breath before speaking again. Do you know what hurts most? Desmond looked up weakly. You allowed your mother disrespect me daily while sitting comfortably inside my house eating my food. Mommy quickly interrupted defensively. I only wanted best for my son. CHIAMAKA smiled slightly. Then you should have helped him become responsible instead of turning him into an overgrown toddler. Beatrice nearly laughed again while Beams disappeared fully into the kitchen because she could no longer pretend professionalism at that point. Mommy looked offended. My son is not toddler. CHIAMAKA pointed toward Desmond calmly. That man is over 30 years old and still asks permission before drinking cold water. Desmond rubbed his forehead in embarrassment while Mommy hissed quietly. There is nothing wrong with respecting your mother. Respect is different from worship, CHIAMAKA replied sharply. Then she looked directly at Desmond again. And honestly, if your mother wants to marry you emotionally, that's your own problem. But I refuse to compete with her inside relationship. Outside near the gate, one gate man almost bent double from silent laughter after hearing that statement. Mommy immediately noticed movement near the door and finally realized the entire staff had basically turned the situation into live entertainment. Shame entered her body properly for the first time. She adjusted her wrapper awkwardly and lowered her voice. Let us just leave quietly, she muttered toward Desmond. But Desmond still refused to accept reality completely. CHIAMAKA, please, he begged again while stepping forward. Everything got out of hand. I swear I love you. CHIAMAKA stared at him quietly for several seconds before speaking softly. No, you loved comfort. The answer entered the room like final judgment. Desmond's shoulders dropped completely after hearing it, because deep inside, he knew there was painful truth in those words. CHIAMAKA then walked calmly toward the front door and opened it wider. Cool evening breeze entered the mansion softly, while silence settled again briefly between all of them. You have 5 minutes, she said quietly. After that, I'll ask security to escort you out. Mommy gasped dramatically. Security? CHIAMAKA nodded calmly. Yes, since both of you forgot boundaries, let me remind you.
Desmond quickly lifted the travel bags again, looking defeated now. Mommy followed behind him slowly, still muttering under her breath. This Lagos life is wicked. People don't value elders again. Everything because of money. But her voice lacked previous confidence completely. The same woman who once entered the mansion shouting that her son owned the house now walked toward the gate carrying nylon bags and confusion. As they moved outside into the compound, both gatemen stood respectfully near the gate, pretending seriousness, even though their eyes practically danced with hidden laughter. One of them quickly opened the gate while avoiding eye contact because honestly, if he looked directly at Desmond carrying Ghana must-go bags like failed housemates leaving reality show, laughter might destroy his job permanently. CHIAMAKA followed them only as far as the upstairs balcony. She stood there quietly watching from above while mother and son finally walked out of the compound completely defeated. One large Ghana must-go bag balanced awkwardly on Desmond's shoulder, while the second dragged beside Mommy, whose energy had suddenly reduced by 90%. The evening sun shined hot against the road, and immediately, Mommy started complaining loudly again because drama was the only thing her body produced naturally. "This sun wants to roast person alive," she grumbled, while adjusting her gele angrily. "And Lagos transport is wicked. Uber prices nowadays are demonic." Desmond sighed heavily beside her. "Mommy, please, let's just go." "Go where?" she snapped immediately. "See problem you caused." "Me?" Desmond stopped briefly. "You are the one who kept insulting her every day." Mommy turned sharply toward him. So now it's my own fault?" "You pushed too far." "You pushed too far?" she repeated loudly. "Who told the owner of the house to leave?" Desmond became quiet immediately because honestly, there was no defense for that level of foolishness anymore. From the balcony above, CHIAMAKA watched both of them arguing softly while walking down the estate road, and for the first time in many weeks, she felt something beautiful returning slowly into her chest. Peace. Real peace. No shouting, no emotional manipulation, no fake family meetings, no dramatic lectures about humility, no grown man waiting for his mother's approval before drinking juice. Just silence. Sweet silence. She remained on the balcony until mother and son finally disappeared completely beyond the estate road. Then she exhaled deeply and slowly returned downstairs into the mansion. The difference inside the house hit her immediately. Everywhere felt calm again. The air itself seemed lighter. No loud voice echoed from the living room, no random complaints about olive oil or television size, no wrappers scattered across chairs. Even the walls looked relieved. CHIAMAKA walked slowly into the massive living room and stood quietly for a few seconds, staring around the beautiful space she worked so hard to build for herself. Then, she removed her heels gently and dropped them beside the sofa before pouring herself chilled wine from one crystal bottle near the minibar. She sat down comfortably on the giant cream-colored sofa and crossed her legs slowly while soft evening light entered through the large windows. At first, she simply sat there silently sipping wine and thinking about everything that happened during the past months. Then suddenly, the full madness of the entire situation hit her properly, and she burst into uncontrollable laughter. Real deep laughter that shook her shoulders completely. She laughed so hard, tears entered her eyes while she held her stomach painfully. "Jesus Christ!" she gasped between laughter. "A homeless, unemployed man tried to send me out of my own mansion?" The sentence sounded even crazier aloud. She laughed harder immediately. Beatrice and Beams kept carefully from kitchen entrance, looking worried at first until they realized their madam was laughing from relief instead of pain. "Madam, are you okay?" Beams asked cautiously. CHIAMAKA waved one hand while still laughing uncontrollably. "I'm fine," she gasped. "I'm just remembering nonsense." Even the workers started laughing too because honestly, the entire story sounded unbelievable now that the drama ended. CHIAMAKA wiped tears from her eyes slowly and leaned back against the sofa, breathing deeply.
Imagine, she said while shaking her head, that man actually sat here confidently telling me to give them space. Fresh laughter attacked her again immediately. Inside my own house? Even Beatrice laughed openly now. Madam, honestly, God saved you. CHIAMAKA nodded slowly after calming down. Yes, she admitted quietly. God truly saved me. Her voice became softer now as reality settled properly inside her heart. If she had married Desmond, that chaos would have become permanent part of her life forever. Every day would have become competition with his mother. Every decision would require approval from two people. Peace would disappear completely. CHIAMAKA closed her eyes briefly and whispered softly, "Thank you, God." Then she opened them again and smiled peacefully. "Bims," she called gently. "Yes, madam. Please make fresh pepper soup for me." "Goat meat or catfish?" "Both," CHIAMAKA replied immediately. "Today deserves celebration." Everybody laughed warmly. "And put soft music, please," she added. "Good music, not sadness." Soon, soft high-life music floated gently through the mansion again, while the smell of pepper soup slowly filled the kitchen. CHIAMAKA stretched comfortably across the giant sofa with wine glass in her hand, feeling lighter than she had felt in months. Outside, the estate remained peaceful under the evening sky, while inside the mansion, calmness finally returned home properly. And as CHIAMAKA sat there enjoying silence, good music, and the comfort of her beautiful Lagos home, she understood one important truth very clearly. Sometimes, the biggest blessing in life is not finding love, but escaping foolish people before they destroy your peace completely. The moral lesson of this story is that kindness should never make people lose their self-respect or ignore red flags. CHIAMAKA helped Desmond with a pure heart, but instead of appreciating her, he and his mother became entitled and disrespectful. The story teaches that love without respect will always bring pain, and no matter how much you love someone, you should never tolerate manipulation, ingratitude, or people who destroy your peace. Sometimes, walking away from the wrong people is the greatest blessing God can give. Thanks for watching this amazing story on African Stories by V. If you liked it and felt inspired, please show your support by clicking the like button, sharing with your friends, and leaving a comment below. To see more interesting stories and learn about different cultures, subscribe to African Stories by V. And don't forget to ring the notification bell so you never miss a new story. Your support means a lot and helps us bring more stories to you. Until we meet again, stay connected, stay inspired, and keep smiling.